Welcome to this explainer. All right, let's just dive right in. Because today we are looking at what is widely considered to be the absolute greatest mystery in all of aviation history. We are going to explore the incredible, honestly baffling paradox of how a 200-ton Boeing 777 carrying 239 people managed to achieve total, absolute digital invisibility in our hyper-connected, meticulously tracked modern world.
To really wrap your head around how impossible this disappearance seems, we actually have to start at 1:19 a.m. Malaysian time on March 8, 2014. These words were the completely mundane, routine final radio transmission from the cockpit. There was literally no panic, no tremor in the voice, no distress signal of any kind. The aircraft was cruising along perfectly normally at 35,000 feet, and everything seemed entirely routine right before the impossible happened.
So, here is the core question that anchors our entire investigation today. Just 2 minutes after that totally normal sign-off, at exactly 1:21 a.m., as the plane was approaching a navigational waypoint called Igari over the South China Sea, the aircraft's Mode S transponder just went completely dark. It vanished from civilian air traffic control screens in both Malaysia and Vietnam. 1 second, it's this massive, easily tracked piece of steel, and the very next second, it's a ghost.
Okay, let's move into Section 1, Tracking Digital Breadcrumbs. The timeline of how quickly this plane slipped past the world's safety nets is just staggering. After the civilian transponder went dark at 1:21, Malaysian military primary radar actually kept tracking the aircraft as it made a really sharp, unscheduled turn to the west. It crossed back over the Malay Peninsula, totally fluctuating in altitude until 2:22 in the morning. And at that point, roughly 200 nautical miles northwest of Penang over the Andaman Sea, it left the range of military radar entirely.
Now, by all logic, at this point the plane should have been completely and utterly untraceable. But, out of nowhere, at 2:25 a.m., so just 3 minutes after disappearing from military radar, something totally unexpected happened. The aircraft's Satellite Data Unit, or SDU, suddenly booted back up. This independent onboard system sent out a faint electronic pulse, initiating a log-on request to a communications network.
So what did this reboot actually do? Well, it established a connection. For the next 6 hours, an Inmarsat communications satellite, floating exactly 35,800 kilometers above the Earth, exchanged what are known as handshakes with the missing plane. Now, these aren't detailed messages. They're just automated, hourly status pings between the aircraft and a ground station down in Perth, Australia. They contained absolutely no GPS location, no heading, and no speed. It was just a silent, electronic heartbeat from a massive flying machine.
Which brings us right to Section 2, calculating the seventh arc.
Because there was no GPS data, investigators essentially had to invent a brand new way of tracking an airplane on the fly. They dug into 2 complex telecom variables. The first was burst time offset. This basically calculates the exact milliseconds it took the signal to reach the satellite, which allowed experts to draw massive distance rings, or arcs, on the Earth. The second was burst frequency offset, which measures the Doppler shift. Think of how an ambulance siren changes pitch as it drives past you. This was measuring the slight change in the signal's frequency caused by the aircraft moving relative to the satellite. By combining those distance rings and the Doppler effect, they were actually able to track the plane's movement completely without GPS.
And the log of these transmissions reveals a really tragic timeline. The aircraft initiated that first handshake at 2:25 a.m. For hours, the satellite kept sending automated status requests, tracking the plane as it mysteriously flew south. Then, at 8:19 in the morning, the system recorded a 7th and final partial handshake. Based on this data, and knowing the plane had exactly 41,500 kilograms of fuel on board, experts deduced that this final ping signaled the exact moment the plane's engines likely starved of fuel and shut down.
And all of that incredibly complex math leads us to a single, very bold number: 7. The seventh arc. This was the absolute climax of the satellite calculations. It represents a highly specific line of probability deep down in the southern Indian Ocean. By establishing this specific arc, investigators were able to drastically narrow down their search area from a seemingly infinite ocean to a focused target zone where the math firmly says Flight 370 exhausted its fuel and ended its journey.
That takes us to Section 3, Searching the Abyss.
The target zone they identified on that 7th arc was about 1,800 kilometers southwest of Perth, Western Australia. Former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott summarized the geography of this place perfectly, calling it, quote, as close to nowhere as it's possible to be. And that quote really hits the nail on the head. It highlights the immense isolation, the brutally strong winds, the towering waves, and honestly, the sheer hopelessness of navigating this initial search area.
The searchers were up against immense, almost insurmountable difficulties. First of all, they were racing a strict 30 to 40-day battery clock on the flight recorder's acoustic pingers. Plus, the natural ocean noise constantly masked any potential signals. And worse, when they eventually had to start looking underwater, they realized they were searching a completely unmapped, terrifyingly rugged seafloor featuring submarine canyons thousands of meters deep. They were practically navigating an alien landscape.
Because of this, the search operations constantly had to evolve to meet these impossible conditions. Early on, vessels desperately towed pinger locators just below the surface, praying to catch a sound from the black boxes before they died. When those batteries finally faded, the mission had to shift to deep-sea bathymetric surveys using autonomous underwater vehicles, basically just to map out the rugged terrain so they didn't crash their equipment. Finally, ships spent years meticulously towing deep-sea sonar grids just meters above the seabed, hunting for any physical debris of the aircraft.
To really put the scale of this effort into perspective, just consider this number: 140,000. In 2018, private marine contractor Ocean Infinity alone mapped over 140,000 square kilometers of that deep seafloor using an entire fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles. It was an absolutely incredible feat of human engineering and dedication. Yet, despite all of it, the vast abyss remained completely undefeated.
Finally, let's look at Section 4, the enduring void.
Now, the ocean did eventually surrender some clues. In 2015, a right-wing flaperon literally washed ashore on Reunion Island, covered in barnacles. Later, pieces were found in Mozambique, Tanzania, and South Africa. This physical debris was crucial because it neutralized the wildest conspiracy theories and definitively confirmed the plane did suffer a water impact in the Indian Ocean. Now, experts in our sources are heavily divided on the cause. Some propose the pilot deliberately depressurized the cabin and flew the plane into the ocean, pointing to his flight simulator data and those evasive radar maneuvers we talked about. Others point to a catastrophic mechanical failure, like a fire from the 221 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries in the cargo hold, which could have incapacitated the crew while the plane just flew on autopilot until it ran out of gas. We are absolutely not here to endorse one over the other today. We're just looking at the data, and the undeniable fact remains: the exact location of the main fuselage is still an absolute void.
Why this whole thing matters, and what you should really take away from this explainer, is that MH370 represents the ultimate clash between modern technology and the vast, untamed power of nature. It dramatically exposes the profound limits of our tracking and aviation infrastructure against the hostile, immense geography of our own planet.
So I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder. In an era where our phones track our literally every step and satellites can read license plates from orbit, how is it actually possible that a 200-ton machine carrying 239 people can remain completely lost to the dark depths of the sea? The truth of MH370 is definitely out there, hidden in the abyss, just waiting for technology and human determination to finally catch up.